Okay.
Yeah, just waiting for Chicago to answer.
What?
Just waiting for Chicago to answer.
Call on the phone.
I haven't got the phone. Oh, it's yours, isn't it?
Yeah.
What number did you call?
Tell me what time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Rob. Leland.
Yeah. Oh, is that Rob? Yeah. This is Fraser. I've sent you an invite to the hangout. Have you seen anything? Hello?
Oh, that's right. Yes, he has met. Yes. That's yes. How are you? I love that, Eddie. Keep coming back. Different avatar.
Yeah, it answered. I said a few words and then the phone disconnected. No, he's emailed me back. He's saying that he's sat waiting on us. So unless he just got there. Oh, there we go. Ready?
Yep.
So what's happening now? I think he can hear you. I think he can hear you though, so.
Hey, sorry, there's a lot of background noise, so I can't hear you too clearly. But
Right. Just tell him I'm trying to fix the screen.
We're just trying to fix the screen.
okay.
Well, on the couch in the weekend. Should be okay soon. Okay, look connected. Mix something. No, I can't pronounce
And it's not just about living experience, it's about data management, CRM integration, social media, practice. They're all kind of features that come
Yeah. Right, for the picture.
I can see you well. I don't know if you can see me and hear me.
Good afternoon, Rob. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Yes.
Excellent. All right. Okay. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Hello. Oh, there. Good afternoon, and welcome to Colby.
Well, it's good morning from me anyway. It's about 9:15 in the morning over here. So good afternoon to you all, though.
It's good that UKTI gets up early. I think basically, if you just start your presentation and then go through it, and then hopefully we'll have some questions and answers, and we can look at the relationship between the Midwest and the East Midlands.
Yes, certainly. So my name's Rob McNeil, and I'm the head of trade and investment at the British Consulate in Chicago. So covering the Midwest region of the United States for the British government. And based at the consulate here, we've got a team of 13 of us in total that work for UK trade and investment in this part of the US. I'll talk a little bit more in a few minutes about who we've got on the team here, what sort of sectors of industry we cover, and also a little bit more about the region that we cover here in the Midwest. So I've got a presentation. I'm sure you don't want to see my face through this whole thing. So I'll pull up a presentation now that I've got that I'll deliver, and I'll show my face again towards the end of the presentation. So hang on, give me 1 second. Okay, so can you all see? Can you see the presentation clearly now?
Yes, excellent.
Okay. So as I said, I wanted to give a bit of an overview of the Midwest region that we cover here, and also the sectors of industry that we focus on here in the UK Trade Investment team. And then also talk a little bit about some of the opportunities in this part of the world as well for UK companies. So looking at who are the major companies in this part of the world, what are the sort of emerging opportunities, emerging sectors that are starting, new opportunities that are emerging for British companies, and then also talk a little bit about export opportunities. I'm not sure if many of you are familiar with export opportunities that UK, through the Exporting is Great portal that UK Trade and Investment run, but I'll talk about some of those that we've put up for this part of the world anyway. British Consulate in Chicago, this is the Midwest cover from Chicago. It's a decent part of the US, and it's quite often a part of the US that a lot of British companies will not always pay a lot of attention to. When they're thinking of the US market, quite often companies will think of the East Coast, they'll think of the West Coast, and this sort of Midwest region is an area that maybe it can quite often be a little bit of an afterthought to many companies. And so I want to make a little bit of a case as to why maybe you should pay a little bit more of attention to what's going on in this part of the world. As you can see from the map there, we cover 14 states from here at the British Consulate. Illinois, where Chicago is somewhat central on the map, just below the Lake Michigan, one of the Great Lakes, the white feature on the center of the map there. But we cover states such as Ohio, Michigan, Colorado, Missouri, Minnesota. So in terms of the region that we cover, this central part of the US, we've got 143 of the Fortune 500 companies. So that's almost 30% of the largest 500 companies in the US are actually in this part of the country. And the population of the Midwest region is 78 million. So that's about a quarter of the US total. So you've obviously got a huge market there for you in terms of whether it's potential end users or if you're looking to sell on the corporate side of things. A lot of economic activity in this part of the country. And then also, in terms of GDP, that's about 4 trillion, so 25%, 24% of the US total. And just to kind of give it some equivalency, I mean, if you look at Germany, it's roughly the equivalent to Germany in terms of population and GDP, this part of the country. So for a UK company looking at Europe, you would never really look at the map of Europe and completely discount the German market. But quite often we'll see British companies looking at the US and they'll completely discount the Midwest. So hopefully by the end of my presentation today, you'll at least give a little bit more thought as to why this part of the country is somewhere that you should maybe bear in mind. So in terms of the sectors that we focus on here at the consulate within UKTI, we have 6 different sector teams. Advanced engineering and manufacturing is one of the busiest ones. We cover, as I mentioned earlier, we cover the state of Michigan. So the automotive industry is very important to us here. We've obviously got the likes of Ford and GM and Chrysler as well, who are headquartered there in Detroit. And while we're seeing trends in the US where the automotive industry is starting to migrate a little bit maybe to the southern states, that's primarily the international manufacturers that are setting up in places like Tennessee or Alabama or Georgia. So the likes of Toyota and Honda and BMW are setting up in the southern states. But you've still got a lot of the big three OEMs in the US that are still headquartered in Detroit. And a lot of the supply chain companies, whilst they might have a presence then in the southern states, all their headquarters tend to be in the Detroit area or in northern Ohio. So this part of the country is hugely important for the automotive industry. And the aerospace industry as well. We've got Boeing headquartered here in Chicago. A lot of people think of Boeing in Seattle, but their headquarters are actually here in Chicago. So we talk to them quite a bit and about sort of the procurement and the technology strategies here in Chicago. There's also, if you're in the aerospace industry, you might be familiar with the city of Wichita, which is a town in the middle of Kansas, really, quite removed from a lot of places. But it's got a lot of the business jet companies that are based there. So the likes of Lear and Spirit, for example, that are headquartered, and Cessna as well, that are headquartered in a town called Wichita. So there's a lot of opportunity if you're in the aerospace sector to talk to companies that are there. And then also in Colorado, we cover the state of Colorado, and there's quite a bit on the space side as well. So, and then there's also the broader manufacturing industry as well. I mean, obviously, this part of the US is kind of synonymous with your more traditional manufacturing, advanced manufacturing as well. We've got companies like Caterpillar that are headquartered here. There's a lot of more traditional manufacturing that goes on in this part of the country as well. So if you're looking for opportunities in those sectors, this really is sort of the prime part of the US that you should be considering. We have a team that focuses on energy, environment, and infrastructure as well. On the energy side, there's some opportunities both in the wind space, although we don't see a huge amount of British companies in that area, but we do see opportunities on the infrastructure side of things. So big infrastructure projects. I mean, it's a huge expansive of geography that we cover here, and it's states like Colorado in particular. There's a lot of rapid growth going on in Colorado, so they're really building out an infrastructure. There's been big British involvement in building a light rail link between Denver and the airport, which is about a 30-mile rail link that they've built there, and there's a lot of other infrastructure projects, whether it's roads or bridges, that are going on in this part of the country as well. On the financial professional business services, Chicago is actually the second largest financial center in the US, behind New York. And it's also I think it's the 9th globally. It's in the top 10 globally anyway in terms of financial service locations. So there's a lot of financial service companies there. I know that's not necessarily a huge strength of the East Midlands, but if there are any companies that work in that space, then there are opportunities there. And particularly on the trading side of things, futures, derivatives, there's a big market for that in Chicago. Food, drink, and retail as well is another sector that we cover pretty strongly from here. So there's a lot of food and drink companies in this part of the US. I mean, you think of it kind of also as the sort of traditional agricultural heartland of the US. So you got a lot of big food and drink companies that come on the back of that. So the likes of Kellogg's, for example, are in this part of the world. Mondelez, who are the parents of Cadbury back there in the UK, are here. And obviously there's a huge consumer base as well. And then on the retail side, we've got companies like Target that are headquartered here, Walgreens, who are the parents of Boots back there in the East Midlands. We've got companies on the more kind of clothing side and apparel side as well that are based here. So if you're in that space, and also a lot of the fast food chains in the US are also located in this part of the world. So McDonald's is headquartered here in Chicago. We've got people like Pizza Hut and Kentucky Fried Chicken are in our part of the world as well. So if you're in any of those areas, there's opportunities as well. On the information economy, creative sort of ICT technology side of things, not maybe as much in terms of the sort of indigenous companies as opposed to maybe the Bay Area, but where we work with companies in this sector is really identifying opportunities in industry. So who are the end users for these companies? So for example, if you're and this tends to work well with companies from maybe the Midlands is if you're, we've worked with a few companies in this area, but if you're a company that does maybe software that's used in the food and drink industry to monitor ingredients, for example, or if you're doing software that's used in the advanced manufacturing industry, any technologies in that space, it's really identifying opportunities for customers from those sectors to identify, end users in whether it's the, as I say, the manufacturing space or food and drink space or whatever it may be. And then the final sector that we cover as well is the life sciences sector. So we have quite a number of, whether it's pharmaceutical companies like Eli Lilly or Baxter or Abbott. We've got quite a few medical device companies as well. 3M, for example, are headquartered up in Minnesota in our part of the world. And then there's a big corridor. Well, there's a big cluster of medical device companies in a town called Warsaw, Indiana, which you've got the likes of Zimmer and Stryker and Biomet, which are companies that are kind of huge companies in that sector, but they're in a relatively small town in the middle of the Midwest. So I wanted to give you a bit of an overview of who are the companies that we've got here. I've talked about a few of these already and of the course of my presentation, but and I'm sure a lot of these will be companies that you're familiar with, but you maybe weren't quite aware of where they were headquartered in the US. And that's one of the things that I like to do, just to raise people's attention to what's going on in this part of the world. As I say, we've got the likes of Ford and GM, Caterpillar, on the food and drink side, the likes of Kellogg's and McDonald's and Mondelez. Motorola Solutions are here in Chicago. Procter & Gamble are here as well down in Cincinnati. They're obviously a big consumer goods type company. And then Eli Lilly as well on the pharmaceutical side. So if you're looking at any of those sectors, any of those potential industries as for customers, then we can certainly help you, and you should be paying attention to this part of the country. So in terms of what I talked about, some of the I guess the traditional opportunities that have been going on, but in terms of things that we've seen emerging over the last couple of years, where there's real opportunity for UK companies in this part of the US. On the fintech space, particularly here in Chicago, there's quite a lot of opportunities in the fintech space, given the cluster of industry that we've got in the financial services sector here. So we're seeing quite a few British companies coming in and doing pretty well on the fintech side. Clinical trials as well. As mentioned, there's a lot of big American pharmaceutical companies that are in this part of the US. So any companies from the UK offering clinical trials, in the UK market, there's opportunities for them. We've seen a few companies in that space that are offering clinical trials back in the UK, but they're able to do business with some of the major companies that are here in this part of the US. On the automotive side, obviously covering Detroit and the sort of the big three there, the big three OEMs that we've got in Detroit. There's opportunities for anything that's sort of in the future of the automotive realm. So things like connected vehicles or autonomous vehicles, electric cars as well. There's a lot of development being done in Detroit in this space. Companies like Ford now, for example, they almost pay more attention to trade shows like CES, which is a big consumer electronics show in Las Vegas, than they do now to the traditional automotive industry shows like the Detroit Auto Show, because for them they see very much, the your personal vehicle is sort of a connection now with your cell phone, and trying to really increase the technology in vehicles, so that anything in the consumer electronics space for vehicles is seen as being a huge opportunity at the moment. Unmanned aerial systems as well, there's big growth in that, whether it's drones. Quite a few companies doing big research here in terms of their applications in agriculture, for example. There's a big company called Monsanto, which I'm sure many of you will have heard of, primarily because they're in the news for the GM crops, but they do a lot of work as well in terms of applications for drones in the agriculture sector, for example. Our digital health market as well. There's a lot of trials that take place in this part of the US in digital health, remote care, because we cover such a big part of the country, and there's quite a lot of people that live in rural areas as well within the Midwest. There are a lot of opportunities for pilots and so on in the digital health space. And then also Internet of Things as well, so connectivity of whether it might be appliances. We've got a lot of big appliance type manufacturers in this part of the world for home goods and everything, or lots of other areas in terms of Internet of Things, so connectivity to things that maybe would have traditionally you wouldn't have thought of connecting to the internet, but now there are opportunities to work in that space, and obviously anything that involves sensors and things like that, there are a lot of opportunities in that space. So those are sort of what we're seeing as emerging opportunities. Now, as I talked to a little bit before, I'm not sure how many of you have come across the Export Opportunities platform on Exporting is Great. But we, here in the US, we post a number of opportunities that we see here in the market that we think British companies might be a good fit to supply. So I'm not sure if many of you check this out in terms of to look at opportunities in the US market, but I'd certainly encourage you to take a look and search for different opportunities. I just listed 5 opportunities that we've posted in the last couple of months just to give you a bit of a flavor as to the sort of opportunities that we publish from this part of the US. But, you know, for example, there's quite a bit of development going on in the high-speed rail side. The US is slowly growing out its high-speed rail infrastructure. So there are opportunities, as I say, both primarily focused around Chicago, but then linking it to some of the bigger cities in the region. So whether that's Minneapolis, for example, or even down to Indiana and St. Louis. An opportunity for food service equipment, that's around, I think it was around a local hospital that was looking for a lot of food service equipment. So we had a good conversation with them, and they certainly were not against procuring from the UK if that was the best solution. Vehicle manufacturers, well, as I say, seeking creative and digital media proposal. That actually was Harley Davidson, who are based up in Milwaukee, not too far from Chicago. They were looking at, they're at the moment going through a process of sort of rebranding and looking to engage with new demographics. So they were looking for creative and digital media agencies to work with. And then, as I say, mobile X-ray, EKG, and ultrasound services for another local hospital. And then one of the OEMs or manufacturers of automotive vehicles in Detroit was looking for technology around blind spot detection systems. So these are just a few of the opportunities. There's obviously a lot more. We over the last few months, we've posted around about 35 opportunities just from the Chicago post alone. And that's been replicated both across the US network and then globally as well. So if you are looking to export, whether it's to the US or to other parts of the world, certainly take a look at what opportunities are relevant to whatever technologies or sectors that you're involved in. So that's primarily kind of my presentation today. I wanted to leave you with my contact details real quick, and then I'll come back now onto so you can see my face, and certainly be happy to take any questions you might have, or if there's anything else to discuss.
Can you hear us at the minute?
Yes, I can.
Just sorting out the slight technical. Can you hear us now?
Yes, I can. Yes.
Okay. Basically, thank you very much for a really overarching impression of the Midwest. I think you perhaps misunderstood the Midlands economy on professional services. Although there's not too many banks, although there are a few in the Midlands, and particularly in the East Midlands, the actual professional services sector is actually really dynamic.
Okay.
And if you look at it in terms of the manufacturing sector and all of the service sector industries that are related to manufacturing, in terms of augmented reality, in terms of design, and then you're talking about at least 12% of the local economy, and overall that total production sector in the regional economy is about 38%. And if you look at a company like Rolls-Royce, it's obviously one of the key manufacturers in the West Mid, in the East Midlands. Something like 50% of their turnover is service sector exports, which is why we think the Midlands is not just really strong in terms of manufacturing exports and bigger than the Southeast and London, but also in terms of service sector exports is quite strong as well. So I think that could be a really interesting area to look at, because very similar to the Midwest, where this development of intelligent manufacturing. We have a few people in sheds or nice little offices just designing things and tying that in with whatever you call 3D printing now. And they've been doing prototypes and either export them or move into full-scale production. And given the strengths in the automotive and the aerospace sector here, then that there's some potential there. But I think what a lot of people don't realise is that for the Midlands and for the East Midlands, the food and manufacturing sector is actually the largest manufacturing sector. It's just in terms of export performance, it hasn't really, apart from beer, it hasn't really done much. And obviously, craft beers are something that could really. The problem is we call them real ales here. I think if we could get people to brand them as craft beers, it'd make a much bigger penetration into the US market. But it's also looking at the whole range of different foodstuffs that could take place. And in terms of the specialism of the actual labour force, out of the 21 universities that we've got in the Midlands, we produce about 25% of all the engineering graduates in the UK, about 20% of all the computer scientists. So it's actually the synchronicity between the Midwest and the East Midlands. I think it's quite interesting to explore. I think the big problem is we don't have any direct flights either to Birmingham Airport or apart from some very large freight things coming from America into East Midlands. So there's some big potential there.
Yeah, no, I know that's an area that, I mean, we've got United Airlines that are headquartered here in Chicago, and we've had a number of conversations with them about trying to increase the links to Birmingham Airport primarily. Birmingham's sister city with Chicago, so there's strong links there between the city of Birmingham and Chicago. So there's been a bit of a push to try and get a direct flight between Birmingham and Chicago. But obviously, you know, if there's opportunity around East Midlands as well, I know there's obviously connectivity on the freight side to East Midlands with UPS having their big facility in the US here in our part of the world, and they're having a big facility there in the East Midlands as well.
They're actually they're both distinct and complementary airports. The key thing is going back to professional services and what they call that horrible phrase, servitization of manufacturing. If you can have long-haul flights between Chicago and the Midlands, if it goes to Birmingham or East Midlands, then your trade actually goes through the roof. And then once, if you looked at, say, Newcastle getting direct flights to Dubai, and their trade tripled in the space of 2 or 3 years, then hopefully we can achieve something similar between the Midlands. Anybody got any questions?
Actually, I've got a question for Rob, and it's about the local culture, because I've got a couple of clients locally who are quite big into management training and development, and quite a lot of the universities are big into corporate training. So, from the point of view of US companies, clients that you're dealing with, how responsive are they to cultures delivering? In some ways, you can leaders in some others following.
Is it possible to come a bit closer to the microphone? Sorry about that. I got the last question, but not all of it.
Just asking questions about how the US, how receptive they are to UK companies delivering leadership management and training. So, you know, we have a lot of universities that deliver corporate training, but we have quite a lot of good small to medium-sized businesses delivering leadership management training in other export markets. So how receptive are the US and your area, you know, the Midwest in particular? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we've worked with a number of companies from the UK with similar sorts of requests, and we've had across, I'd say, pretty good results, really. I mean, we haven't been able to connect with everybody that they wanted to meet with, but we've certainly been able to make some connections for companies in that space. I mean, obviously, as I mentioned, there's a lot of the Fortune 500 type companies here. So, you know, those are quite often interesting clients for people that are doing the corporate training and everything. again, I don't know. Your point about academia, was that more looking at the academic market here in the US as well?
No,
Okay.
not so much about looking at the academic market, but because we have a lot of universities in the region,
Yeah.
we have a lot of corporate training that's delivered in the UK, and actually we seem to be delivering a huge amount in the Middle East. So whether that corporate training would be well received in the States, it's one of those quite open questions, really.
Yeah, no. As I say, I think it would be certainly. I mean, you'd obviously have to make sure it was customized to the local market. But then there's also, on something like this, I don't think there'd be any hesitancy in terms of working with a UK company rather than a US company, as long as obviously you offered a competitive product and everything. There's a lot of recognition in the US that there's expertise in the UK that they want to try and tap into across the board, really. So there's not really, with the exception of some industries, like whether it's the defense industry, which is a little bit harder and everything. In most industries and most sectors, there's not really a big hesitancy towards working with UK companies. UK products are normally seen as being quality here in the US. There's a perception that UK is synonymous with quality, and as long as you demonstrate an ability to do business locally in the market, so whether that's regular visits out here, or you maybe have someone on the ground here or a partner on the ground, you can do business. You're developing a commitment to the market in that sense, then there's not normally that much of a hesitancy to work with UK companies.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Another question?
Yes, I have a question. Hello, Rob. My name is Karen Gallagher. I'm with the IT for UKTI in the East Midlands region. I also wear the hat for food and drink as food and drink champion for the region. So I'm dealing with lots of food and drink businesses, and also in Northamptonshire where we are today. My experience has always been that to deal with the States, we have to treat it like 52 different countries. And therefore, particularly from a route to market point of view, any business looking to trade in the States would need to appoint a distributor in each state. Is that the case? Same for the Midwest?
Yeah, so that's a very good point that you raised there. In that when we talk to UK companies about the US, you've really got to treat it as a series of smaller markets. From a distributor standpoint, for example, just as you alluded to there, if you're trying to appoint one distributor, and this food and drink obviously, but this applies to most industries that we work with. If you're trying to appoint a distributor to cover the whole of the country, you're most likely not going to end up with a successful result. If you're working with someone that has got national coverage, if they've got truly national coverage, then they're going to be representing a lot of different companies, and you're going to be a very small part of their portfolio that they represent, and you're probably not going to get too much attention. Or you'll end up working with someone that really only can do a small part of the country, but they're claiming that they're doing the whole country, so you're not actually getting full national coverage. So we always recommend that people look for a series of smaller distributors that will cover smaller regions for you, and you'll get a lot more, I guess, attention there because they're representing less products, they're doing a smaller part of the country. And on the food and drink side, as you alluded to, you certainly want to think about it as local, especially on the food and drink side where you can have regulations that are maybe localized to a state by state basis. You can also have a lot of the supermarkets or grocery stores over here tend to be more regionalized. So there's only really, I guess, one supermarket that you would consider national. That would be Whole Foods. Everything else tends to be more local. So every few, it'll cover, one supermarket chain will only cover a few states, for example. So the whole selling nationally doesn't really work here anyway, in terms of selling to a supermarket chain and getting national coverage. Even companies like Whole Foods, because of their business model and they're looking at more organic foods and so on, they tend to all procure locally anyway for each of their markets. So we definitely recommend that on the food and drink side, as I say, looking locally, and the same for most of the sectors where you're looking for a distributor. And that's something we've had success at helping British companies within the food and drink side in the past as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Unfortunately, our Twitter sphere hasn't worked quite well today, but we'll be getting some questions in later on. this presentation will be posted on our website. We'll send you further details. But obviously, East Midlands UKTI see this as part of a development of the deepening and widening of the relationship with your office. But obviously, given the expertise in a range of sports from rugby, cricket, basketball, and possibly football, if you want to come and visit the East Midlands, then you're very welcome. We'll probably get you a ticket to one of the games. But thank you very much for an excellent presentation.
No, thank you for your time today. And is it worth me touching on Midlands Engine at all or not?
Yes, if you want to, that'd be really good.
Okay, so there's been a few changes, which I'm not sure how many people in the room are aware of, but there was plans to bring a mission from the Midlands region, East and West Midlands, under the Midlands Engine branding, led by Sajid Javid. And the plan was to come to both Chicago and Toronto in a couple of weeks' time, actually, just towards the middle of April. Unfortunately, we've had to postpone that because of the minister's availability. But we will be looking to do that later on in the year. So it's not been cancelled, it's been postponed. We pulled together quite a bit on the ground here in Chicago, and as did my colleagues in Toronto as well. So if people are interested in learning more about that, I'm sure your ITAs will be able to give you a good overview in terms of what opportunities exist in terms of taking part in that mission. So hopefully look forward to rearranging that for later on in the year.
Excellent, thank you very much, and look forward to seeing you in the East Midlands.
Okay, thank you very much.